Grow, Sell, and Retire is the podcast for the lazy overachiever. BD Dalton, author of The Assisted Purchase, True Gravity, and Grow, Sell, and Retire, is here to give his 25 years of secrets, tips, and assistance to take your business to the next level. This podcast is for anyone who wants to sell more, work less, and make better business. Now, here's your host, BD, with today's GSR podcast.
Hey everybody, BD Dalton here, Grow, Sell, and Retire podcast, Secrets for the Lazy Overachiever. And I'm here today with David Dodson, who wrote a really boring little book called The Manager's Handbook. But it's not the Manager's Handbook, the part that made me excited and want to talk to David. David, what is the follow-on from The Manager's Handbook?
BD, I'm still laughing about the introduction that I wrote a boring book. I think that was amazing. Okay, it's called The Manager's Handbook, 5 Simple Steps to Build a Team, Stay Focused, Make Better Decisions, and Crush Your Competition. So hopefully that's a little bit more exciting.
That is more exciting. Crushing competition. I think that's what everybody wants to do. Even though we sit back and we think, oh, we just want to have a good business. No, we want to crush our competition. It's more fun that way. So what brought you to write the book? What's the background of how you got to this? Because I've seen lots and lots of papers. And where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Jackson, Wyoming. And why I wrote the book is my career began as an entrepreneur. So I grew up in rural Colorado in the agriculture business, went to Stanford undergrad, didn't have any money. So I had to work at a slaughterhouse in the afternoon after class. But the whole time I wanted to be in business for myself because my dad and both my grandfathers had been in business for themselves. So that's what always drove me. So when I went to McKinsey for a couple of years, and then I went back to business school. And then from then on out, it was all entrepreneurship. And I learned on the job, and it was expensive and it cost me money, and I lost some good employees and I lost some good customers, but eventually I kind of learned it. And then I was asked to go back to Stanford to teach, where I had a chance to really observe other entrepreneurs. And also I was investing actively. And I thought to myself, there are just some people out there that get more stuff done than others. And what is it about them? So because I had this perch at Stanford, I spent about 3 years investigating people who were just so much better at getting things done. And what I found out was it had nothing to do with where they were born, how tall they were, whether they were funny or wrote boring books, BD. It had to do with the fact that all of them had embraced and mastered 5 skills. There were no exceptions. So after that revelation, I thought, well, okay, that's fine, but that's not very useful. How do I take these 5 skills and put them into a way that everyday managers like I was when I was an entrepreneur, and of course, like, your listeners are, who are, managing departments or managing their own companies, that they could learn and master these skills in the same way. And I just want to point out one kind of really interesting observation. I'll just pick one person, but the list goes on. Let's take Sam Walton, for example. When Sam Walton opened his first Walmart store in 1962, he didn't invent anything. And he was surrounded, by the way, by Kmart, JCPenney, Target, and Sears. And what he did, in terms of crush the competition, he annihilated those 4 iconic companies in the United States. He didn't do it because he invented anything. He didn't do it because he was some great speaker. And he did it because he mastered 5 skills. And then he had an organization that mastered those 5 skills. And by the way, these people like Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos that we look at and we go, oh, they must be visionaries. They can see around corners. My investigation proved definitively that is not the case. They were just very, very good at executing on these 5 skills.
That's awesome. And I love Walmart. Has a very good space in my heart. It paid for my university degree. So I went through their management program, accelerated management program, and they paid for all of my university in the States, which at that point in time was couple $100,000, So
I'm glad you told me that. That's fantastic.
So I love it. I loved it, and we could choose. Back in the mid '90s, we could figure out how many tubes of toothpaste needed to go into Arkansas new Walmart store and what flavor they should be. And that was what we had back then in data analytics, which was amazing at that point in time. But that's just back to Sam Walton and everything else. But
yeah.
So what everybody's here for is you've got 5 things that you've tracked down these people. So let's start with number 1, because I've got some questions I want to ask when we get into the ones about working with teams and building people and also letting people go. So that's an interesting twist in this whole world of employment or secret quitting or silent quitting or whatever it is. So number 1 kind of task or thing that you have here that you found as a guideline.
A commitment to building a team. And what was interesting about this for me is that in my course at Stanford and every other faculty member and every book, they all say, you got to surround yourself with good people. You got to build a team, et cetera, et cetera. Because, of course, you can't build a decent sized organization as an individual performer. You have to build a team. However, none of these people who said this actually said how to do it. So my students would walk out of the classroom. They go, oh, I got to build a team, got to build a team. And then they're like, oh, but I don't really know how. And when I looked at the people who were fantastic at building organization, building teams, it really came down to a series of building blocks. And each one of those building blocks, when you take them by themselves, was not that challenging. And the way I think about it, I'm a miserable golfer, okay? But I have tried to golf. And when they tried to teach me how to golf, he didn't say, okay, go hit the ball and make it go in the cup, and I'll be back in an hour. He said, here's how to hold a club. Here's how to have your position your feet. Here's where your shoulders should be. Here's the difference between a 7-iron and a driver. Each one of those was what I'm calling sub-skills. You put the sub-skills together, you master them. Well, you hit the ball, guess what? It goes down the fairway. The same thing is true with hiring, for example, or onboarding. And so that's what the book, The Manager's Handbook, takes it and breaks it down into these individual components. I wrote each chapter in as few words as possible, because I knew that the people who are going to buy my book, they're busy. They're running a department or they're running a company. They don't have time to read 250 pages on the same thing over and over and over again. They say, like, give me the information, give it to me quickly so I can go back to my job. And then at the end of every chapter, as you know, BD, I outline in notes, about a page of notes. So you don't even have to take notes when you get the book, because I do the notes at the end so that when you go to onboard somebody, I got to onboard somebody. I read that book a month ago. I don't have to reread the chapter. Just go to the one page and look at it.
That's awesome. And that's a lot of how my listeners, they can absorb stuff and consume things. So sometimes it's just go back and hit that back up and figure out that little bit. That's awesome. So building a team. Second thing is, what's the second step?
A fanatical custodian of time.
Nice.
By the way, there are 5 here, and I didn't set out to find 5 things. I just wanted to observe. And this one was interesting because it started when I was having coffee with a friend of mine, Tom Staggs, who at the time was COO of Disney. So he had about 250,000 people reporting up to him in his organization in 6 continents all across the globe. So we had an enormous, complex company. And I'm having coffee with him at Stanford, and the tables are outside because the weather's always sunny in California, right? And I walk out there and I'm 5 minutes late and I'm thinking about the emails I didn't get done and rushing around. And there's Tom sitting there calm as a cucumber, just kind of looking at his phone and thinking about things. And I was like, Tom, how do you do it? And he said 2 things. He said, well, I surround myself with really good people, and I'm very careful with how I manage my time and manage my day. And we got into this conversation about how he's got the same number of hours in the day as Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or I do or you do, BD, and how you have to manage that time well, and so I break it down into, how you run meetings, how you manage email, for example. This digital disaster that is going on here, it's remarkable really that over the last 25 years, we've been swamped with all of this technology and tools and apps and everything. And it's all supposed to make us more efficient, right? All it does is it makes it easier for people to pull us away from our important work. And you got to fight back. And the best managers do. Then about, maybe 3 or 4 months after that, I was in Jackson, Wyoming, and a real good mentor and advisor of mine, Michael Porter, was staying with us, and he was watching me kind of run around a little bit frenetic. And he did what I later joked with him as an intervention. And he said, I want you to take a look at something. And he showed me a report that he had done where they had followed at Harvard. They had followed 27 high-performing CEOs. And if you can imagine this, BD, they followed them in 15-minute increments. So they had 60,000 hours of data. And Harvard chronicled, what the lessons were of them. And one of them was that these people who were running big organizations and they were high-performing CEOs didn't waste time. And it also meant, interestingly enough, that when they went home like my friend Tom Staggs. They were calm. They weren't checking their email during dinner. I mean, and you can say, well, okay, but they've got big organizations. All these. No, it's how they got there. It's not you get there and then you get to implement all these processes of how to manage the time. If you manage the time well, that's how you get to be COO of Disney, or how you get to be able to run these large organizations.
Two things from that for me. You casually said that Michael Porter was somebody that you just kind of hung out with. That's pretty cool. But the second thing is, and I want to come back to this, is so let's just hit one thing: meetings. What's one takeaway? Because we get rammed into all these meetings, whether it's a Zoom meeting or a regular meeting. What's one thing that we can do today to make it so that a meeting is more effective, or we get out of it quicker instead of just sitting there catching up on everybody's dogs and cats and summer vacations?
Yeah, it's a big deal because Bain & Company did a study and they found that the average manager spends 23 hours a week in meetings.
Jeez.
Now, on top of this, BD, 50% of these same managers self-report that those 23 hours are either ineffective or very ineffective. So that means that we waste, 12 hours a week in meetings that we think are ineffective. What I did is, it's not as if I ran terrific meetings. I went and I said, okay, who are the people out there on the planet that are really, really good at running meetings? And then they make their organization run effective meetings. And I looked at how they did it. And there were some commonalities across the board. Everyone had it a little bit different. But first of all, they were very structured. Their meetings followed a structure. Second thing is they didn't put up with people coming unprepared. You had to come prepared. The meetings were always forward facing. So the meetings were not about history lessons of what happened last month and on, but they were forward facing. They were to help shape decisions. And then what I had to do, BD, is I had to harmonize how, Steve Jobs ran meetings and how Jeff Bezos ran meetings and how Bill Gates ran meetings into a single formula on how to run meetings. Because what I didn't want to do is write a book and tell stories about, well, this is how they do it at Amazon and this is how they do it at Exxon. And you go, well, that's fine, but give me something I can use. So I set it out in 7 steps to running an effective meeting. And I've watched those 7 steps get implemented over and over again. And by the way, PD, there were things in there that people did that I thought were like, I don't know if, it's one thing if you're at Amazon. I'm not sure if you're running a lumberyard, you can actually enforce that on your team. So I tried to just pick the aspects of running a meeting that were very effective and also very easy and straightforward to implement, and they work.
That's awesome. Okay, move on to this is number 3. So we've gone through some great things with fanatical time management. I love that part. And so let's move on to number 3.
Yeah, it was a willingness to seek and take advice. And the 2 elements of that were that these people recognized that they had a lot of decisions to make every week. And if they could make them faster, that would increase their chances that they could crush their competition. And also, it would allow them to make better decisions. So think about a world where not only are you making your decisions more quickly, but you're also, the probability that you make the right decision is higher. And they knew that in order to do that, most of the things that they're facing either have been solved by someone else out there or someone who has some pattern recognition. They have some reference points that they can help guide. But it didn't go, it was beyond just, well, these people have the humility to call up and ask advice. They were very intentional about asking advice. And I had a little bit of an unfair advantage, BD, because as a faculty member at Stanford and also as an investor, we have in our fund, we have about 70 companies that we're invested in. I'm getting called a lot by students and CEOs that we're invested in. And I noticed that most of those calls were very ineffective. We'd have a 20-minute call, let's say, and it was 16 minutes of background. A lot of times I didn't even really know what the goal of the meeting was. I only talked for about 6% of the meeting. And I started enforcing a structure, which is If you want to get advice from me, that's fine. I want you to get it's not about me protecting my time in this case. This is about me giving the most value. So I would say, do it this way. Start by telling me what is the problem you're trying to solve or the opportunity you're trying to take advantage of. 1. 2, give me the least amount of background information that you think is necessary for me to help you. Now, the least means enough, but no more than enough, because otherwise it intrudes on our chance to talk about problem solving. Third is, give me a chance to ask clarifying questions, which means that you can miss low. If you forget something, it's fine. Our background's fine. I'll ask. And so those are clarifying questions. And then the next one is shut up. And I realize that's a little bit flip, but then you've got to just listen, okay? Because that's the whole reason you called someone for advice. And then at the end, you summarize what you think you got, what you thought you heard. And then the last thing is follow up with the person by letting them know what happened. By using that just very simple boom, 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 boom formula, you get 2 hours worth of information in 20 minutes. And that's what the best performing leaders did. They pick up the phone, they go, okay, I got this problem, BD. Here's the problem. Here's what you need to know. What do you know about this problem? And then they start taking notes. Great, BD, thanks. Talk to you later. Boom. They do 2 or 3 of those calls. They know the answer.
David, that's amazing. And people don't do it enough. People don't go to people enough and admit that they have issues or problems. And
see, it's not such a boring book afterwards, right?
Yeah, of course not. Yeah, it's a little bit better than I thought. The headline notes there. Okay, let's go to number 4, because I think number 3, people have to have that gumption and have to understand that they can ask questions and take it on board. What's number 4?
It's the ability to set and adhere to priorities. And those 2 verbs are really important. Set priorities and then adhere to them. Because a lot of people are good at one, but not the other. They can, in a moment, they can say, oh, this is what we should be working on. And everyone goes, yeah, boss, let's all work on that. And then 3 weeks later, they're driving home and they think of something else, or some shiny object in their way, or some dumpster fire. And now there's a new priority, and then there's a new priority. And that's not what the best leaders do. And my favorite kind of iconic story of this was when I was having a drink with Herb Kelleher, who was the founder and ran Southwest Airlines forever. And he was telling me the story about how when they were down to early on and they were competing against American Airlines in their American Airlines home market, Dallas, Texas, they were down to literally $143 in their checking account is what he told me. And he said that the only way they were going to do it is they had to have one clear priority and get everybody focused on it. And what it was that planes only make money in the air. And so they were going to do a 10-minute turn, which when the plane lands, it was going to be back up in the air in 10 minutes. They called it the 10-minute turn. Well, of course, we know what happened to Southwest Airlines. They annihilated American Airlines in their home market. Southwest Airlines, I think, has the best profitability record of any airline ever in the history of the world, for that matter. But he did it by just getting everybody focused on one clear priority. I saw that over and over again. Warren Buffett tells this very famous story about when Mike Flint, who was his pilot at the time, came to him and he was thinking about what he wanted to do with his life. And Warren Buffett said, okay, go out and make a list of all the things you want to do. And he came back and Warren Buffett said, okay, circle 5 things. And he circled 5 things. And he goes, what do you think this means? And Flint told Warren Buffett, he goes, well, I should work on these first before I work on these others, or I should work on them. And he said, no. Everything else on the list is the do not do list. And prioritization is not about not doing the things that you don't think you should do or your organization should do. Prioritization is doing things that in your every bone in your body, is a good idea. But to quote Joni Ive from Apple Computer, you don't work on them because you're working on something else. And by the way, there was no one who was more focused on priorities than Steve Jobs. He could get everybody like a laser beam on the iPod or Apple Music or a laptop that would work. And he wouldn't let anybody work on anyone else. And I can't imagine a company that would be filled with more distractions and more cool things to work on than Apple Computer. Well, that's why he crushed the competition. He did. By the way, Steve Jobs didn't invent the mouse. He didn't invent the laptop. He didn't invent online music. He didn't invent portable music. He just out-implemented everybody.
That's amazing job on that, and keeping things prioritizing in general. If people can implement these things very little at a time, they can change their world. And it doesn't have to be all at once. And that's the beautiful thing about all these. So number 5.
Yeah, number 5 is an obsession with quality. And this one, BD, was the one that surprised me the most. I wasn't kind of expecting that. But at some point along the way, I realized that every one of these leaders were obsessed with quality. But they were not obsessed with quality because of some, ethical viewpoint, or I want to do right by the customer. They were obsessed with quality because they knew it was the best way to make money, the best way to crush your competition. I mean, think about it this way. Or I would ask your listeners to think about it this way. Think about what do you fear more? Do you fear a competitor that has a great sales force, great marketing department, and a darn good product, or one that has a fantastic product and a good marketing and sales organization? Of course, it's the latter. Okay. And by the way, there's this virtuous cycle, because if you have the highest quality product, the best salespeople want to work with you. So you get that as well. And the reason why you'll make more money on quality is, first of all, it's easier to keep a customer than get a new customer. The only way that you can keep a customer is because they like your product and they're satisfied. There's no way around. You cannot outmarket or outsell your existing customers, because they already know what the experience is like. Second is you get pricing power. And everybody knows that $1 of incremental price goes right to the bottom line. So it's very, very profitable. And the third is that it makes it much easier to attract and retain the very best people. So these leaders who were effective, they thought about quality in terms of the best lever to try to make more money. And it's interesting, though, most people think, oh, well, we have a really good quality product. And there's a thing called, have you ever heard of the Lake Wobegon effect, BD?
I've listened to Lake Wobegon, but I have not heard of the Lake Wobegon effect.
All right, so Garrison Keillor had this radio show on NPR, Lake Wobegon, and in the opening line, you might remember, BD, he says, Lake Wobegon, where all the children are above average.
Yep. Which
of course is impossible, because half are above average, half are below average. Soon after that, there was a study of drivers in the U.S. and 93% of drivers said they were above average. And so that got coined among cognitive neurologists that was called the Lake Wobegon effect. Okay. An exaggeration of your own, worth or your own effectiveness. Okay. So now let's bring it to quality. There was this fantastic study I saw that showed that 80% of CEOs thought they offered a superior customer experience. 80%. Okay. Now, guess what their very own customers said? 8%. So the CEOs thought it was 80%. Their own customers said it's only 8% of them. So the book talks about, how do you really measure quality? How do you find out what your customers really value? And it's an analytical process that anybody can do. But it is not about relying on your own intuition, because the Lake Wobegon effect in terms of quality and running an organization proves you do not know what your customers really think of your product.
David, that's amazing. So you had some kudos that happened to you today in the book. So what happened this week to the book? You said it was Wall Street Journal?
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was exciting. So it hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, which was exciting, and then right after that, it hit the USA Today bestseller list. And I'm almost more proud of the USA Today bestseller list, because the Wall Street Journal, it's a renowned organization, paper, everyone knows it. But I wrote this book for the everyday leader, and when it hit the USA Today bestseller list, that is when I felt like, okay, the people that I want to have this book in their hands, they're the ones who are buying the book. So I'm very proud of that.
That's awesome. Okay, couple questions for you. So we talk about all of your obsessions and fanatical things that you've learned from people. What's one bit of tech that's making your life easier, faster, or better?
I would say that the most important piece of tech in my life, and I'm not trying to skirt your question, is that I have really eliminated a lot of the business organization tech in my life. I describe in the book how I plan out my day on a simple Word document. It's the same document for the year. At the end of the year, I start it over again. And I've sort of de-teched my planning. in a way that has massively increased my productivity. And when I think about how important it is to plan out your day, and I describe how really good people plan out their day and how simple it is, it only takes about, 90 seconds to plan out my day. And I talk about in the book about how if you do this, you will get 70 more minutes in your day. If you do this, you will get 40 more minutes in your day. And plenty of people now have done it. And they've come back to me and they said, you know what? I thought you were full of it, but I thought maybe I'd get another 10 minutes. You're right. It was 70 minutes.
That's fabulous. Okay. So this is the rewind moment. So if somebody's coming in and they just listened to David for the very first second, at the very last second of it, what's your kind of comeback phrase here that's your number one top tip?
Some people are way better at getting things done than others. They are not superhuman. They've simply mastered 5 skills, and those skills can be broken down into sub-skills, and you can learn them.
That's awesome. So where do we find out more about the book, and how can we buy it and do all that type of stuff? So where can the listeners go to find out more about it and get the book?
Easiest place to buy the book is Amazon or Barnes & Noble online. You can follow me and pay attention to some of the things that I'm working on my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn is a wide open door. If you want to be, connected with me LinkedIn, the answer will be yes, because I love that opportunity to talk to people, and I try to keep things posted there. I do have a website, daviddodsonauthor.com, but I think LinkedIn's probably the best place.
Perfect. Well, David Dodson, thank you very much for such a boring book, the Manager's Handbook. So thanks for letting me take the mick out of you a little bit. But it's been great having you on the Grow, Sell, and Retire podcast, and can't wait to speak and learn more about you as we go along. So thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely, BD. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for joining us on Grow, Sell, and Retire. For more information, tools, or to book one of our team members to work with your team, business, or to speak at your event or conference, visit rockfind.co.uk. If you like the podcast, you'll love one of BD's 3 books, The Assisted Purchase, True Gravity, and the book the podcast is based on, Grow, Sell, and Retire. If you want to work for the rest of your life, that is your business. If you don't, that is ours.